Hello and welcome to the Horror House Podcast. I'm Dave.
I am Chris. We are two dudes that like to talk about horror movies and real life horrors. This week in the Horror House, it's time for real life, and we're talking about predictive programming. Amongst other things, a lot of things are going to get involved in this conversation. Dave, why don't you school us a little bit? Let's get this started.
Predictive programming, like what is it? Is it a conspiracy theory? Is it science? Is it pseudoscience? Is it bullshit? Like Spotify. But what is it, Chris? Have you when I kind of proposed this,
right?
How familiar were you with the idea of predictive programming?
I kind of knew like the gist of it, but I didn't really know that it was called predictive programming. I think when you first presented the idea, I was like, what are you, what? I don't know. I'm not sure what that is. So I don't know if I just thought it was something else, but I was vaguely familiar with the concept of it. What about you? Obviously you'd already known about it, but was it something that was new to you, or was it an older idea you'd already known?
Older idea for me, but not like ancient Chinese secret older.
Modern Chinese secret?
I went down a rabbit hole of conspiracy theory for a while on the YouTubes.
Right.
I don't know, 10, 11 years ago, maybe. I was still on weekend option supervisor then. And had a lot more time on my hands during the week, and I went down these rabbit holes. And YouTube hadn't started like
corporate
moderating content as much. So
right,
people could say anything they wanted to say back then. Man, it was the wild west out there. And so I had heard some of these, and because there's so much, like it's easy to go down and skim past. But for this, I wanted to dig in a little bit. Like, where's that line? What is it? And really, there are two different but highly interconnected theories of what predictive programming is, and of the meaning, the who's behind it, all of that.
Lay them on us. Lay it on me. Lay it on the Horror Nation.
So theory one, predictive programming is social programming. If I want to have a black president, I will start having black presidents in my TV shows, in my movies, so that when a black candidate runs for office, it's not a shock, because whether it's absolutely no. I'm not going to equivocate here, Chris. It's not good to be prejudiced in that way. It's not. I know that's not a fucking hot take, but it is also, prejudices are very natural. It's what made us survive as a species, is being able to recognize patterns. This will come back later, so on the test, and remember those patterns. And so if I see my buddies, every time they eat these bright red berries, they die, I start to put that pattern together, and I should avoid these bright red berries. Now, our brains are not really always as high functioning brains as we think. They're still very animalistic lizard brains. And so, just the same as the berries became a pattern to avoid, well, if I only see old white guys as president, then the idea that, hey, someone else, a woman, a man, somebody of a different identity, different religion, wants to become president, well, my brain may scoff at that. Oh, that breaks the pattern, and that's not a good thing.
So it's conditioning you for a change that is coming.
Yes. Yes.
Now,
I
is that I mean, so that would insinuate also, right, that a control of that change is had by
that and
something.
that is the um malicious and the horror part of this is that they're conditioning, you're being conditioned so that they can control this to happen. They want you to react in a certain way. They want you to accept certain ideas.
Right.
Um, I, without getting to their errors, I mean, we are very. I don't care, Chris. Fuck it. We're pretty progressive guys. I mean, we don't give a fuck. We don't judge. I hope conservatives love our show as much as I hope liberals love our shows. I don't care how somebody fucking votes. But um, a conservative might say the gay agenda. Oh, you put more gay people on TV so that you're forcing us to accept them. When really, like the idea that gay people exist is not controversial. They fucking exist.
Right.
And the same way straight people are used to seeing every character on TV be straight, gay people just want, I want to see a gay person here and there. Black people want to see a black person here and there. There's nothing nefarious about
Something you relate
representation in and of itself, but there are some that see a nefarious aspect of this of,
right.
oh, they're forcing us to accept something. They're really not. But that's the fear, right? That's the horror is not always rational fear. It's just fear or fear inducing.
Right.
You could um so that's one type of predictive programming is just we're being socially conditioned.
Right.
And the other type, the probably more nefarious type, is just a little bit more about the actual control of events. And this is the idea that, well, way back in Bugs Bunny cartoons in the 1950s, and then with Simpsons and with Back to the Future, Hollywood was giving you clues to let you know that they were going to stage attacking the Twin Towers and bringing the towers down. I think there was a Marvel cartoon where the Twin Towers came under attack. I mean, this has been something that's been in the popular culture.
Right.
Um, and so the conspiracy theory or the conspiracy realism, wherever you fall on this belief, is there nefarious forces, the Illuminati, the rich and powerful groups, the elites, the lizard people. They are orchestrating these events, but for some reason they have to give you clues, or they're giving clues to the people who know how to interpret them.
And some of them
Why
are
they can't
very, I mean, kind of on option 1 and option 2, some of them are really grasping at straws. But this one,
Oh,
I'm not going to go into examples yet, but like false flag events, right?
mhm.
Um, which I feel falls into this one a little more, where certain things are happening that are, then people want to say that, X event was staged by, whoever, whatever elite uh, controlling entity you want to name.
Mhm.
And I have an eyelash in my mouth and it's driving me insane right now.
Spit it out,
I
Chris.
keep,
Spit it out.
it's gone, it's gone. But eyelash or nose hair, do you reckon? Never mind, never mind. But false flag events, that it just seems strange to me. And I watched. I'll save it. I'll save it. I'll save the examples for later. We'll get to the examples. Some different types of examples for both kind of ends of that.
Sure.
But is there anything else you want to kind of preface before we get into the nuts and bolts and kind of the meat and potatoes of this conversation
Yeah,
before we hit an ad?
I guess the only thing I would say is that there are a lot of crossover between these two ideas.
Yeah, yeah,
They're preparing us socially for the events they're um, orchestrating. So it's not just a warning to followers, it's preparing us for the events they're orchestrating or conditioning us to react in the way they want us to react. And so, um, that is there is some overlap between those two things. And the other thing is with especially with theory one is that this is social conditioning. Maybe it's not conditioning us for change. It could also be conditioning us for complacency or to stay the same. And that would be maybe the patriotic propaganda, the John Wayne films, and yeah, a lot of people like John Wayne. I'm not shitting on anybody who likes John Wayne movies, but he had a whole career playing the tough man cowboy and the tough GI, the guy who couldn't pass a physical to join the military,
And he didn't like
playing such a
horses.
tough guy. So,
or that rumor. What was the thing? Or that may have just been a line from a movie. But I mean,
what was the line? I'm sorry, I was
he didn't even
self-involved.
like horses or some such. It may have been just something from a movie. Like he wasn't obviously a cowboy. That just wasn't what he did. That's just what, I mean, it's kind of the same thing. It's like obviously Christian Bale does not have a bat cave and goes around fighting crime. But
What?
maybe in 50 years people will look back and be like, I like that Christian Bale fighting crime. He's a good crime fighter.
Yeah. And you can take that for what it is. I do think people are smarter on the whole about some of those things nowadays, because
You would
I
hope.
think a lot of people did accept programming at face value. You see John Wayne as a tough guy. You're supposed to support the United States no matter what they do. You always listen to, and people are more skeptical and more critical thinking about some things these days, and in some ways less, I guess, too, because people are critically think in a way that leads them to believe their intuition is better than the advice and expertise of actual experts.
Right.
So we've kind of gone too far in some respects, in that way. So,
Well, let's hit an ad. We will come back. We'll talk about more on predictive programming, get into some examples and some of our opinions on the matter. And if you want to let us know what you think about any of this, hit us up on our social medias. They're listed down below. And we'll be right back.
examples of predictive programming. Maybe when you talk about the prediction of the future and preparing us for those events,
Uh-huh.
like, no, I don't think it's possible to be even moderately aware of pop culture without knowing the number of times that the Simpsons have apparently predicted the future.
Everything, essentially, it seems like.
Yeah.
From
The Ebola outbreak, the 9/11 attacks,
Yes.
and the election of Donald Trump.
Yes.
I am very aware of the episode Bart to the Future, where Lisa is the president and she's in the Oval Office and someone tells her, um, you had a lot to clean up after the Trump presidency. And at the time, because I think that was like 2009, 2010, something, talking about out of my ass here. That episode came out, like no one would have thought Trump was running for president.
Well, I saw something that was it early 2000s that he actually did have like a half-assed run at it, and The Simpsons made obviously some jokes on that at the time, but obviously it wasn't to the degree he took it, in 2016. So because something of that nature already happened and they made fun of it, it's easy to look back at just the joke of it and be like, "Oh, jazz fingers, like there it is.
Yep.
There's the predictive programming." And I'm like, "Oh, right, right." But it was if it was just that, it'd have been explained away. But it wasn't just that. It wasn't just the Trump stuff. Um, I know there's a 9/11 thing. I'm not sure what that one is, and I don't know what the Ebola one is either. But I know the talk and all the like BuzzFeed, not BuzzFeed, like Watch Mojo. Here's
Mhm.
5 Simpsons clips that predicted the future.
Oh, I just popped my mic.
Oh, take a shot.
The
That's a Chris move.
Yeah, right. I did a professional job of it too. The 9/11 attack was one where they visit New York and they had like the Playbill magazine telling what's going on in New York, and
Hmm.
like it was like the price was $9. It had a big nine that thing, and then
Oh,
the
yes.
art on the pamphlet was an image of the Twin Towers,
Right.
and the Twin Towers formed the what 11 for 9/11. Um, they also famously maybe predicted the steroid scandal in baseball, but did they really? Because they did this at the height of the Sammy Sosa, Mark McGuire home run races those couple years,
Right.
and it was already the it was a secret to nobody at that point
Right.
that steroids were in baseball.
And
Even before Jose Canseco. Jose Canseco gets the credit for coming out because he wrote the book. But Ken Caminiti actually was the first one to come out and say, hey, I'm lousy with steroids. Steroids are lousy all over baseball. And all these home runs, the players are fucking juiced. And he died before that really became a theory and it kind of got swept under the rug. Then Jose Canseco comes out, and even his coming out and admitting this got swept under the rug until there started to be this landslide of evidence, and you couldn't be ignored.
right.
Um, there's also with the that goes along with the Donald Trump election. There's a Simpsons clip that shows him coming down an escalator, people in the mall with signs that mirrors almost exactly his actual candidacy announcement. But people conflate that with the Bart to the Future episode, and it's actually not. It's from a separate thing that actually did come out after his announcement as part of a parody of that announcement. And so it was not predictive in any way. But that doesn't stop the brain. Like I said, we see patterns in sometimes even where they don't
Right.
exist.
I mean, to kind of piggyback on that too, sort of the ease of information, right? And the easy access to spread information also helps with a lot of that, where it's like, here's this fucking meme, right, that I've made that nothing about it is factual, but I'm going to share it to you, and then you're going to share it, and then they're going to share it to 2, 3, 4, 7, 10, 12 more people, and then they're going to share it. And it's just, information overload. And so
Yeah,
that applies into some of these.
we have the entire depth of human knowledge at our fingerprints, but it's not just knowledge that's on our fingerprints. It's every dumb bullshit thing anyone ever said.
Right.
Historically, books that are full of bullshit either become religions or don't do anything
Yeah.
and are forgotten about in the sands of time. Only the good stuff filters through. But we live in this age where everything can get to you, and the more you look at the dumb shit and the bullshit, the more of the bullshit you get. So,
Analytics or the not analytics, but what is the word? What's the word I'm trying to say? The algorithms.
a
The fucking
bird,
algorithms. Bird? Oh,
Bird is the word. Bird, bird, bird. Bird is the word. Got you. I got you, bitch.
you got me. You got me. God damn it. I'm going to delete this whole section. But like the analytics, like if you look at certain things, it's going to try to figure out what's best to show you next, right? On whatever platform you're looking on. So, I mean, obviously.
And best in that case being defined as what you engage with.
Yes.
And people don't always understand that. If I only engage with things I hate, the algorithm is actually going to send me more things I hate. If I only engage with things I like, it's going to give me more things that it thinks I like. Whether that shit is true or not, the algorithm does not fucking care.
You know the whole joke of like, if I die, delete my browsing history. I would be more afraid of an algorithm that has been created for me to be released than I would my actual browsing history, I think, at this point. Maybe that's just me. I thought you'd be like right behind me, being like, I'm with you, brother. That is fucked up.
I'm stunned in silence, and I am worried. It got the gears in my brain thinking like, after I die, someone's going to be like, every time Dave saw a kookaburra in a bikini, like he lingered on those images a lot longer than anything else.
Why did you replay that video 5 times?
Yeah.
Hey. I was taking a shit, had to wash my hands. Like it's, but that, yeah.
I will watch Twitter while I do things, or TikTok while I do things. And so, yeah, then it'll just play the same fucking video on repeat. And so somebody's really getting paid based on me.
Yeah.
Like
I thought of that the other
multitasking.
Night. Literally, as I was finishing up in the bathroom, and I'm like, this video has replayed a few good times. I hope this doesn't affect my future with this application. But let's move past The Simpsons. And I wanted can I put one in next? Because I'm curious your thoughts.
Yeah, this is a democracy, Chris. You have the floor.
Carpenter's They Live. And it kind of it's more like alien programming, I guess, in that, but it's certainly does that really fall into, in your opinion, predictive programming, or is that like more of like the subliminal messaging thing that's kind of different? Or what are your thoughts on
I think
that?
it does. I think it does, because I don't think anyone really thinks there's necessarily a subliminal message on that cover of the magazine.
Mm-hmm.
But there absolutely is a conditioning. Women's magazines show women that are petite, with thigh gap, big boobs, big butts, full lips. And that makes them want to buy products that make them look like that. And that you begin to think that's the norm. So there is, whether it's intentional or not, I don't know, but it is social programming.
Or is that just advertising? Like they want you to buy their thing?
Not just advertising. So it really kind of started in the 80s. We've watched enough movies from the 70s, 60s. I mean, we've gone all the way back to the 1920s here on the Horror House.
113 episodes. What's up?
I mean, yeah, marathoners here.
We should have really advertised that more. Anyways.
Yeah. Hindsight. But in the 70s, like the actresses had all started to become the cream of the crop beauties. They were good looking, but the men still kind of lagged behind. In the 80s, you had to see that. Even like the simple dudes,
Tommy
the simple
Atkins,
chicks,
laying pie.
yeah, they're the you got more of a change to, hey, even the average people in a movie are actually above average looking people, because we want people to enjoy this picture, and no one wants to see some fuggo.
Now, do you think that that's actually a really good point? more so, is it programming potentially? Is it programming uh more of a attraction to more attractive people, therefore to make obviously your offspring more attractive, and at least in theory, right? And obviously, I feel we look very much different than people of the '60s. I feel like now look even different than people of the '70s
Yeah.
in
That's,
in features and like it's weird. Do you think there's a programming towards that, like trying to make a very beautiful people? Or maybe.
I don't think so because I think that you just have better looking people at the forefront in these TV shows, in these movies. And I don't think average people
Oh,
are necessarily any better looking than the average person of the 70s. I think that our brain sometimes thinks they are because what we value as a society is different. In the 70s, I would guess, I mean, I was born in 74, but then I would think that in the 70s, like women of childbearing age were more likely like I need me a good steel worker.
right.
And then the 80s it was I need me a
Did you see that
investment
thing
broker.
showing it was like the age of the cast of Cheers, right? And they were all like early 30s, mid 30s. Norm, all of them. All of them. And you're like, "Holy fuck, I'm older than the cast of Cheers was?" And like
That's fucking insane,
and
man.
part of that, you know, is like differences in style and shit clearly, but I
Right.
don't. You've set me down a different path in my brain about predictive programming. I feel like it's trying to make sexy humans.
It could be, man. It
And
could be. How else?
I ain't got a pony in
How
this
how
race.
how else are we going to seduce the kookaburras? So
um, but
I also think when you look at a TV show, I saw something similar with Jennifer Aniston just this week, and I think that there was a larger article that had all of the cast of Friends that they did this to. I I don't get into that, so I only saw like the big headline blurb that I saw that had a picture of Jennifer
uh
Aniston at the time she did Leprechaun, which we should totally do on the show sometime,
absolutely.
and Jennifer Aniston now. I mean, that's been 30 years almost.
Mm-hmm.
40 years almost, right?
30. I think you're 30.
30? Okay. I would say she's better looking now than she was then.
I mean, from uh Leprechaun, I always say Poltergeist in my brain quit on me. To Friends, she had a little bit of the facial stuff
Little work
done.
done.
Yeah,
Little work
which is
done.
fine.
I would
Do your
What
thing,
about
but
health? What about the effects of, you don't have just you're not just an actor now. When you're hired to do a movie, you're not just an actor. They hire the actor, but they also hire a strength and conditioning coach, a cook for you, so you can
right.
lose 40 pounds to do the machinist, and then they hire a strength and conditioning coach and a different cook so you can gain 60 back to play Batman. So,
There's a great section kind of about that in Bruce Campbell's book from what is it? If Chins Could Talk, I want to say. It's been several years since I've
yep,
read it, but
yep.
he was talking about, doing that kind of training and stuff for is either Evil Dead 2 or Army of Darkness, and like he could I don't know if he described it as he could physically feel his body changing, but it was something like that. Like he was obviously becoming this more chiseled, like refined
Uh-huh.
human in his physique and stuff because of that's what they were aiming for. And but um, do you think that some of that could like here's Bruce Campbell, right? In Army of Darkness.
Sure.
The fucking jawline that would impress most gods.
The cleft chin.
Yeah, like is that, like does that fall into this? Like obviously Bruce Campbell, the way he looked in Army of Darkness, is kind of different from. Just rewatched Evil Dead again the other day, just kind of for the fuck of it. And I don't know that my wife immediately knew that that was Bruce Campbell. And I think that's fair.
Here's where I just now came to this realization, because I just a moment ago argued that kind of against or was neutral towards they're making sexy humans conditioning. But if they make humans want to be sexy, then they have products to sell.
Ooh, right.
And so, it's all about that. It's all about that. It's not just accidental. So,
that moves away from the kind of planning or predicting of the future side of it, though, which is I'm gonna try to leave my sexy humans behind. I know I got very preoccupied. My apologies. What's another one on your end that you would like to talk about as far as examples go?
Well, so you brought in the crafting the future, so let's go ahead and bring that into the fold here with another classic horror house episode, Contagion. The movie we passed up to do, Contagion, Outbreak with Dustin Hoffman, and this idea that COVID, the Hollywood knew COVID was coming, so you saw more of these diseases. Now, I will absolutely say the problem with that idea is that Hollywood knew this was coming, and is that only uninformed people. I'm going to be very neutral there, and I honestly
don't be neutral. This is our fucking show.
No, I really mean this. I really believe it's not ignorance. It's not stupid. It's just uninformed. Only uninformed people did not see these things coming. We started having swine flu outbreaks and SARS outbreaks.
It seemed like every handful of years there was something new.
Every election cycle, they would come, which we know that traditionally those there's the term is influenza-like illness. And so we know those influenza-like illnesses were coming more frequently, but at that time it was about every 4 years where we have these outbreaks. Now, swine flu never amounted to much. SARS absolutely could have, but didn't. And the main reason that SARS did not really amount to anything is that it made you too sick too quick. And this isn't like it's too quick for what I programmed. It's just the reason Ebola in Africa never had huge outbreaks is because it killed entire villages before they could travel from village A to village B. SARS was very similar. You got it, you got sick within 2 days. And so you didn't have time to travel very far. But if we think back and we use our critical thinking skills and we look back to March of 2020, right before the world shut down, we were looking at when you got infected, I could full on mouth kiss Mr. COVID right in the mouth. And the only thing that would happen to me for the next 6 days was nothing. And then day 7, maybe still nothing, or I'm laid up and can't work and sick as a fucking dog. But for that time in between, before that 50-50 mark, because it was very much a crapshoot, before that I have 6 days where I am just a walking virus factory, walking around, brewing up viruses and putting them out into the atmosphere to spread them from person to person. And we travel so quickly. We're such an interconnected world and interconnected society these days that, things travel.
Right.
So it really wasn't a surprise. Several years before COVID, the state of Indiana said that all long-term care facilities had to do a disaster assessment, decide what their biggest risk factor for um, disaster was, and do what they call tabletop disaster planning sessions. And so our administrator, Steve, who has been in the game a long time, he's a really smart guy for these things. He saw the writing on the wall with SARS and swine flu and these things, and he said, "We're going to disaster plan a major infectious outbreak. How do we keep food coming into the building? How do we keep water flowing? How do we keep the lights on? How do we keep staff upright so they can work? How do we keep our residents safe and prevent this infection?" So unlike nearly every nursing home in the whole country, prior to COVID starting, years prior, we had well over 15,000 pieces of PPE in storage. So we were probably better equipped to handle this than almost anyone else. Now, there's a plot twist here. When Steve ordered maintenance to go out, pull it out of the storage containers, we have big metal storage containers out in the back parking lot. And when he said, okay, things are getting bad, pull this in, so let's have it in the building ready to go. We hadn't had a case. There really wasn't much testing yet. I don't know. Maybe there were a couple of cases in Indiana, but there wasn't everything. They went out to get it, and it was gone. Someone had broken and stolen all of it. Now, a lot of theories out there, because who even knew it was out there? All that stuff. It could have just been some knucklehead, like, the crime of opportunity. Let's see what's in here. Oh, well, what's going on? This might be very interesting. I'm going to take it. Me and my cousin one time, I'm pretty sure the statute of limitations are up. We broke into a building and stole a giant fucking box full of light bulbs one time. We did not have a need for, 100 fucking light bulbs, but they were free if you're a criminal, so we did it. And so that might have been the crime of opportunity we're looking at. But some people point to those movies and say, no, this is them warning us, predicting that this is going to happen, and they're socially conditioning us to accept it when it happens. What are your thoughts?
So I had just read Cronenberg, an interview with him from right as he was making Crimes of the Future from
Interview with the Cronin vampire.
Yes, and they mentioned COVID and all that stuff, and he's said it wasn't something that necessarily shocked him because he said he'd lived through polio as a kid, and all these other things that things that you'd already mentioned. So it wasn't something that took him by surprise or felt even very foreign. I'm kind of, I may be putting words into his mouth now, and I'm like, that's right. So to look at, something like Outbreak or Contagion, Outbreak being 25 years ago, Contagion being, I guess now it's since we're a few years into COVID, Contagion was 2011. So that was 9 years before, which Contagion, it may still be our most listened to episode, for good reason. And then we took over a year off because of, you had shit to do with your profession.
We're pretty busy there for a minute.
That took precedent, and Um, so when it comes to, and I'll just get into kind of how I feel, I guess, about predictive programming, at least with some kind of elite entity like controlling. Uh, I mean, we've had plagues after plagues after plagues of different sorts, of different magnitudes, I guess. But COVID is the first one that felt like it was. Oh, this is serious. Obviously, it was
Mhm.
serious. Clearly, I mean, we've both had it at this point. Have you had it twice yet, or are you one?
No, just one time.
Just one time.
Just one time.
Me too. Me too. I feel like we had it right at about the same time too. Like within a month or so of each other, we
Hmm.
had it, which is okay. And that was 3 years after the fucking shit, nearly. Um, so when it gets to things like that, and these kind of elites, this Illuminati or New World Order, the powers that be, I'm just not there for it personally.
Hmm.
I mean, this shit has been happening forever. I mean, we're scummy creatures. They're like, if they were to examine what's under our fingernails right now, any one of us, like, who fucking would want to know? First off, second, ugh, it's gonna be disgusting. And of course, like, what is that? And that could cause the COVID the sequel.
So you can either believe that the Illuminati decided to use the shitty little fucking small podcast to start the warning of humanity, or you can just believe that sometimes people know what they're talking about. And I'm telling you right now, it takes about 10 years for a pharmaceutical company to develop a new antibiotic. And within 1 year, we start to see bacteria that are resistant to that antibiotic. It happens more and more all the time. 64% of nursing home residents in the United States, and this isn't worldwide, in other countries that maybe don't have the technology that we'd have. Spoiler alert, a lot of times they have better healthcare than us with worse technology, because we have gatekeep good healthcare behind insurance or only hold it back for the wealthy. But besides that, 64% of long term care residents in the United States will be um, colonized or infected with a multi drug resistant organism at some point in their stay. 64%. And that number is rising. This is going to affect us. Antibiotics are going to be not effective at some point in the relatively near future. So prepare to go back to the days where Nana cuts her toenail clipping her fucking nails and she actually gets her foot and dies of a fucking staph infection. Prepare for the days where healthy people pick up random shit from the Walmart bathroom and die on a ventilator 3 months later because antibiotics do not work anymore. This is absolutely happening. It is
Are we being
absolutely
programmed for
going to
that?
get worse. I don't believe we're fucking idiots. We're fucking idiots. I've been a nurse for 30 years. 30 years ago, when I was in nursing school, they had already been talking for 10 years. We're getting ready to face a shortage of nurses. People live longer. There's fewer people wanting to be nurses. We're facing a shortage of nurses. That was already happening, and COVID has accelerated that, let alone the fact that just in this country, over 1 million people have died from COVID, gone out of the workforce. So these things are absolutely happening. If you open your eyes, you can see that these things are happening. We are we still haven't learned, in this country at least, that the healthcare of the common people, the poor people, absolutely affects everyone's healthcare, because infections and bacteria can grow in some person who can't afford good healthcare, and they can mutate in ways that affect everybody eventually. So we haven't learned that, and this is happening. So you can either say that the Horror House podcast is part of predictive programming, or this is just a thing that happened. Now, this talk, Chris, just took a very serious, dark tone. So let's bring it on back. I didn't plan to go there.
Shootings.
No. I mean, that's the whole thing. That's the whole thing, too.
I'm not going to get into it, but I did write a thing. I didn't even know it was a thing, but in Dark Knight Rises, there was I guess on a map, there was you could see Sandy Hook written. Yep. And of course, some people believe that was predictive programming for what happened. We're not going to get into the conspiracy possibilities of that, because fuck, of what it was. Things like that just are crazy. And that goes back to what I said earlier about false flag events, where these tragedies are supposed to have been faked, right? Mm-hmm. And I mean, who knows what the next 10, 20 years will be of pop culture. It could end up being a thing where this whole pandemic that we've had to experience over the last couple years was a false flag event in some people's eyes. In some people's eyes, it maybe already is.
Well, we absolutely know that false flag events are real. Hitler used one. He got elected in part because he burnt down his own party headquarters and blamed it on the communists. Hitler was not a communist. He was not a socialist, despite the fact that the party name had socialist in it. If I'm like that happy church fun time at camp and I'm really a serial killer, it doesn't, just because it said happy in the name doesn't mean anyone was really happy. That's just the name. We also know that there was, I'd say for me, I'm on the 87% certainty that American leadership knew that Pearl Harbor was coming and did nothing because they knew it would pull us into the war. And definitely Vietnam. One of the inciting incidents that actually got us full in on Vietnam was the Gulf of Tonkin incident. And that is 100% false reporting to the American people of an incident that actually happened. It's not a fake event, but the what we told the American people was fake. Most of the event was fake. Most of the event was fake. There was some shooting. There was a boat blown up, but we weren't directly attacked. But we use that as an excuse to get into war. So false flags offense do happen. That doesn't mean everything that bad happens is a false flag. My thing, here's where I sit with false flags, Chris. If I know I'm pontificating a lot tonight, I'm wearing out my welcome. To actually orchestrate an entire event, say, Sandy Hook, if we want to go to Sandy Hook, to actually orchestrate that, you have to have so many people. How do you keep that a secret?
Right.
I mean, I work in a building with 200 employees, and if we write up a staff member before I'm walk out of the office afterwards, half of the staff already know it happened. So how do you keep those things a secret if you have, 500 moving parts?
That's
100. If it was 100 people, how do you keep those things a secret? Yeah. To me, it's more likely that you twist an actual event, put out a false narrative. But I feel like even that is harder to do um, than these days than it was in, say, the 50s and 60s, to keep the fact that John F. Kennedy was banging Marilyn Monroe a secret. That was pretty easy to do. The press went along with it because it was a different time, and those times are gone now. Although we see some machinations in political things of some people willing to do anything to stay in power. I just don't think you could get big sign on for those big false flag things. It is what it is. What I was going to bring up. Yeah. Go ahead. Go ahead. I'm stepping on you.
Let's talk for a second about that kind of. So that would obviously, things like this would involve Hollywood or in the entertainment engine, as it were. Which I mean, the assumption of predictive programming, applying to the government and New World Order or whatever. So does that mean that it's running our entertainment? Maybe not perhaps 100% of it, but enough of it that they can, insert their messages and their programming wherever they need to, or make entire productions where they need to. Does that, and there's certainly, we could have a whole other discussion about Hollywood. Hollywood's kind of a catch-all term I'm using here, but Hollywood as child predators, right? There's that. But Hollywood as, in a weird way, kind of ground zero for a Illuminati, NWO, the powers that be. And fuck, I've seen enough bad movies to feel like, I think I said movies. I've seen enough bad movies to feel like I'm not on board for this, because good Lord, there is some bad shit out there.
If Hollywood's all powerful, explain Thor: Love and Thunder.
I watched a video just the other night of a YouTuber. I'm claiming no names, but I'll maybe by the movie you'll figure out who it was. But By Dawn's Early Light was a movie in the early 90s about approaching nuclear war, or like the onset of nuclear war between North America and Russia, or the United States and Russia, however you want to. But Ukraine is involved, right? This movie from 1990, 33 fucking years ago. And dude is like, is this predictive programming? Like, even this city in Ukraine is playing a part in this. And I'm like, what is the cutoff for this? This movie that was released to HBO Video, which I don't even know that means it got a VHS release, and it just got released to HBO like there on that platform in the day. So what is the cutoff of when are they programming us, and when has that program stopped? Like, what is the fucking point there? I'm hot now.
That's the long game, man.
Yeah, that pisses me off, actually. Like, they're trying to program 7-year-old me. Like, how old would you have been in 90?
16.
16? So 7-year-old me, 16-year-old you, like this fucking political thriller starring people we don't give a shit about. James Earl Jones was in it. But that could have been, I'm air quoting, predictive programming for a war that started in I forget where we're at now, 2022, maybe when it started at the beginning. For a World War III, a nuclear exchange. I have a hard time with some of this. And then to get you involved, I don't want to leave you behind. Oppenheimer.
I'm along for the ride.
Nolan's Oppenheimer's coming out this year, which I'm super excited for. But I'm seeing stuff on YouTube from these creators, word used loosely, saying, is this predictive programming? Nolan's Oppenheimer, the kind of the father of nuclear weapons. Is that a thing we should be at least curious about? I say fuck no, because Oppenheimer was all of that was nearly 100 years ago.
30 years, 30 years is a long time. Like it's hard. I can't predict what I'm going to have for dinner tomorrow. I've got hamburger out of the freezer yesterday, so it's thawed and ready to
But you're not
tomorrow.
committed to have Jackie's grandchildren eat that hamburger.
I mean, I have no clue if that will ever make it, if it will make it onto the
next time
tomorrow.
You're cooking in the kitchen and your daughter shows up, you should look over at her and be like, I have a sack of potatoes I'm saving just for your grandchildren, and I want you to report back to me what her reaction is.
Confusion. I can probably tell you right now.
I can kind of picture her reaction.
Her and Stella will probably begin thumbing through brochures for Shady Acres and move me in there with the goddamn Golden Girls.
But yeah, what do you think about this kind of how far back can you go? Really?
I mean, I would think if it's more than 2 years, it's too far gone. People change too quickly. I'm not the same person I was in the 80s, 90s. It makes sense that would be. I mean, if I think about since in 1990, who was our biggest threat? And that time it was still USA versus Russia. That was the entire theme of the 80s. We all decided like USA versus Russia is the entire theme of the 80s. Mm-hmm. And it was a little bit later into the 90s that we started worrying about the Iraq and that wasn't till later into the 90s. It wasn't late in the 90s, the late 90s, but it was 92 I signed up for the delayed enlistment program with the United States Army. And so, 1990, like I said, it was still in Russia. So that's not showing anything. And if they were programming us, we would have had the nuclear bomb right now, or by now, because like every other thing in the 80s, there were three things that ran through the 80s theme-wise. Nuclear holocaust, Russia versus USA, and the Vietnam War.
I was gonna say He-Man, personally.
And that was fourth place. That was a close fourth place.
Yeah. And it's funny that to think of the little bit of age difference we have between us. I experienced like the tail end, right, of the Cold War. I didn't get much of it being such a wee lad. So to me, right, like Russia ain't the threat for a long time. And it is something like Iraq or something is more prevalent to me. So maybe the programming, is adjusted for the generation. It's like, oh, well, that's a lost cause. So now we have to pivot. So do you think predictive programming is it pivotable? Is it something that can change? Because it feels somewhat kind of static to me. It's like it's nuclear war. It's like, okay, but like, is this as colorless a brushstroke as you're going to give me?
I feel like it can be changed because I feel like it is plausible that people with money and influence want to shape the world to their liking. Not necessarily through, the jokes that they feature on the incredibly great sitcom Bosom Buddies, but through things like political action. So it doesn't surprise me that people with money and influence would want to change things to their liking. Now, I firmly believe they should not have an outside say. They should not. They should have no greater say than everyone else. But we live in a society that gives that to them in a variety of ways. But I have a hard time believing that every rich person thinks the same and wants the same things. Same way as every poor person doesn't think want the same things. Same as every middle class doesn't think the same, want the same things. Um, except for the only thing we agree on is we all like, whether you're man, woman, gay, straight, short, tall, black, white, Asian, whatever. We all like a nice pair of boobies. But outside of that, everyone thinks differently. And I would be more prone to believe that there are multiple groups of wealth and influence that are all trying to shape the future and kind of competing against each other.
Right. Okay.
I would believe that more than the idea that there's one homogenized group pulling the string.
I agree. I think I agree. And something I hadn't even wrote in my notes, but something as you were talking kind of reminded me, like sexuality in films and in TV and stuff kind of ebbs and flows, right? Like obviously the hippie era, fucking in the forest in front of the deer, whatever. But then it ebbs and flows a little bit. We obviously in the 80s, AIDS became such a big thing, and kind of maybe that is what kind of maybe more than the 70s quieted down that kind of sexual liberation. But then as things keep going on, I think to to HBO, hello HBO. You're not sponsored, so fuck you. I should have used a different name this episode to describe HBO.
Why? SAB.
But I feel like 10 has Game of Thrones been like 10 years now removed. Like that really brought a sexuality, and showing sex in those kind of episodes, right? And I feel like that made other shows really free to do the same thing. So a different kind of sexual liberation isn't the right word, but advertisement
value,
maybe?
or
fuck that wasn't around the decade before, and certainly not the decade before that in movies. So that's interesting and something I hadn't thought much about, but certainly in entertainment, the depiction and the act of, right, has vastly changed in kind of this last decade, maybe less, of entertainment, which is interesting.
well, I
What
think
does
that
mean?
I more than there's a concerted effort to bring sexuality back. I think that's more of the copycatism of capitalism.
True.
Yeah.
I don't know that that's ever left.
You were
right?
successful showing boobies. I'm
Right.
gonna show boobies. Oh, Deadpool was rated R superhero movie and did really, really well. All of a sudden, everybody wants a rated R superhero movie. Marvel has the connected universe. Oh, we need to connect our universes. We need to pull the VeggieTales universe and connect it to the legendary heroes of Transformia universe. It's a copycat. It's a copycat. You want to copy what is successful.
First thing.
So if somebody starts to fail, everyone will abandon ship on that.
Which is why we're ending this podcast with this episode. And next episode, we're going to be sponsored by DMT or
Oh
whatever
yeah,
it is
yeah,
Rogan
yeah. Well, I
does.
don't know. I don't listen to them.
I'm down. I'm down. And
Oh, I
Spicy
do
Honey
like me some
from
hot honey.
Guatemala or wherever.
I do like me some hot honey. So yeah, get us that sponsor.
This
Get
is
us,
like
get us that. Yeah,
neurotropic
Mike's hot
honey or
honey.
some shit.
Buy it now wherever Mike's hot honey is sold. Um, I also think I had heard watched a video. It was a series of videos on History Channel a couple years ago, several years ago. I'm thinking late 90s. I was living in Hanover at the time, and it was about drugs. And they did a whole week where each night was they took a different class of drugs and did each night and talked about the history of that drug and how America ended up with drug laws. And basically, all the drug laws were fueled by racism. Everyone was okay with marijuana until
Right.
jazz speakers bonded over that and spoke out against things, and it was, oh, well, jazz singers are going to associate with marijuana. Oh, well, then we have to.
This is marijuana,
Yeah.
Dewey. You don't want nothing to do with this.
That is a great fucking movie. Um, will it get me addicted? No. Oh, I'll get hungover. No. Oh, well, I won't want sex. No, it makes sex even better. But anyway, you know,
That is one of the best comedy scenes.
But
Anyways,
one of the themes in this also, besides the racism behind those drug laws, is the ebb and flow of drug culture. And it's very much falls in 10-year cycles, much like fashion falls in 30-year cycles. Things that were cool 30 years ago coming back in fashion. In a little different version. So, you know,
yeah,
we're still living this 90s nostalgia now. We're kind of there now.
No.
I think
we're in 80s still. Especially, I think we're firmly 80s, especially given Stranger Things. Fair. And we have talked. I feel like things have slowed down a little bit as far as that goes. As far as, because I mean, in the 90s we were obviously doing, like, one of my favorite movies is Dazed and Confused, right? And that was looking back at 70s teenagers and stuff. Some of that, you know, to look at the times, anyways, feels like that's
drug culture, and so this is where I'm getting to.
We are doing
drug culture flip flops on a binary about every 10 to 12 years. You have 10 to 12 years where drug culture is popular and in the mainstream. And then you have this radical change of, no, drug culture is not cool. Just say no, move away from these. And then it comes back in vogue.
Yes.
And so, yeah, maybe we're in a drug culture is not cool. Yeah.
Let me ask you this. That's a good point. So when I was a kid, Dave, I feel like the first half of kind of my life, I'd say maybe to, I don't know, maybe 8, 9, 10, thereabouts. It was very say no to drugs. And then, I mean, that's also getting into teenage years, which everybody's a rebel and wants to do their own thing and fuck the rules or whatever. But certainly there was a change in at least what I was consuming entertainment wise. That was like, it's all right. Like, here's weed, mostly weed.
That's because, Chris, you weren't listening. You were listening to metal, but you were listening to the wrong metal. You should have been listening to more Striper.
No.
I don't.
No, you don't say that.
Chris, you don't need
you don't
weed.
say that, Dave.
You need the good Lord in your heart.
You're fired. I need Slayer.
We need blood.
I need fucking Slayer. Jesus saves no one. That was the weirdest moment of Horror House history right there.
Next on the hardcore mumblecore podcast.
There was I like the other kind of drugs really. I mean, and drinking a little bit. But it really was just weed for I feel like my kind of teenage life. Maybe I mean, how do you feel about that? Was it similar? Was like until you hit there, it was a strong advertisement. no drugs.
So
But
here's
then it
how
was like,
dumb I
smoke a
was
little weed.
and
Get in
dumb
there.
my good friends who I love were back in the day. I distinctly remember saying things like, I'm going. I don't care if I get a driver's license ever. I'm going to ride a bike forever, motherfucker. So that's an example of things I absolutely have said, and I have absolutely heard said from me and my friends. We absolutely said those. I'm going to ride a bike forever, and I'm never going to do drugs, man. I like to be high on life. When I want to get high, I just hit that sweet, sweet Bert. And stupid fucking shit like that has actually come out of my mouth and the mouths of my friends. Now, then we try. Then I've been open. My dad had a problem. I used to steal his beers, shake them up, pop a hole in the side, and fucking shotgun those things. 5, 6 years old. Um, I'm not saying I could do a whole beer at 6 years old, guys. I'm not saying that. I'm not saying there weren't consequences, but it was an era of get outside and play. If you're outside for 6 hours, even if one beer kind of gets you tipsy, 6 hours later, you're okay to come in when the streetlights come on. So things happen. But I absolutely went from that to, I'm never going to get high. I don't need drugs when I got my BMX bike. And then I went from that to, hey, you want to get high? I want to get high and drinking. And my aunt told me one time, I always know when you boys are drinking. Because Dave crashes hard when you guys are drinking. Dave crashes so hard. Okay. And so yeah, we thought we used to think we were getting away with shit, but no one knew. Not really. One time when I had my own place, my dad busted in, and it's because my best friend Malcolm was next door getting arrested in the empty lot beside my house, and Dad come busted in the house, and he said, without missing a beat, "All right, dump the beer and flush the drugs. Everybody find a place to hide and don't answer the door." But he said it like Tommy Lee Jones on the hunt for fucking Robin Williams.
I bet your dad. Yeah, I've met your dad. If he told me to do anything,
we were all
I'd be like,
oh, yeah, drugs.
I'm on it.
What
I'm
are
on
you
it.
talking about? Sip. So, but yeah. I think that culture does come and go. So
now, do you think that? I mean, similar experiences on our ends, a little bit different, right? But do you think that that is predictive programming? I mean, if you look at what you experienced, right, and then look at mine, I mean, is it similar enough you could be like, that's just culture, right? Yeah. That's just the way it is. Like it comes and goes. Or is that the Illuminati trying to, fashion the youth to become adults and whatever kind of fucking weird adult
natural
they need at the time?
Teenagers and for society to want to rebel against what their parents stood for until they reach a certain age, and then they want to align themselves with the thing their parents aligned themselves with. And so you have this peer pressure, and then I think it's almost as much as the art is actually imitating the life in some of these situations. Oh, people aren't cool with drugs. We'll quit putting the drugs in the movies. Oh, their attitude has changed because people are like, I don't care what my parents say. I'm going to do drugs. We'll provide them with some. It's never total. Like, there's never been a time when there's no drug culture and no alcohol culture. And there's never been a time where there's no voices saying drugs are bad, okay? But the loudest voices just rotate from one to the other. If we push drug culture for 12 years, at some point, if I want my art to stand out, I have to do something different. Or if I'm going to rebel, I'm going to do something different.
So that's a great point that we've not talked much about. I think I started to try to talk about it with Hollywood and then got dumbass sidetracked. The art of creating. So I
Mhm.
consider myself a bit of an artist in one way or another. You as well. We're here on this podcast that we like to create each week, and we have different topics and talk about different shit and make different jokes. It's never the same show every week. It may be a similar format every week, right? But we're creating a different fucking thing every week. And there's art in creating something. I think the term content creator is goofy. I always have. But there's some truth there. I am, unfortunately, must admit, I've grown used to it, and I'm like, okay, that's fair. But that is essentially what we are doing. How do you think that art and predictive programming are able to exist together? Can they exist together? Because I mean, like you said, we're talking about different experiences as kids, becoming teenagers and rebelling and stuff. The art, wanting to create something, and then you have, the the powers that be. Are they allowing you to make that art? I mean, is your art then controlled by them? What are your feelings on art versus predictive programming
I mean,
and the powers that be?
art is always best when it's a little subversive. And so, by that very definition, it resists quote unquote programming. Now, I'm not going to say that there are never
Right.
forces that want to try to direct and inspire. If I was wealthy, here, I'll just say this, and I'm just talking this through as it hits me. If I'm wealthy and I like the
That's how I
kids
live.
eat too much French toast these days, I'm going to do something about that. So
Mhm.
I can inspire, I can hire an artist. Like, I'm going to commission you to do a painting, and I want you to do a painting with French toast, but instead of a pat of butter, I want a little swirly curd on it. And so there's one piece of something I've put out into the mainstream.
So
Go ahead. Go ahead. What's your question?
so okay, picture yourself as an artist,
Yeah, I'm there.
right? And you have, and this, in a weird way, this is kind of how I've always kind of looked at creating your own thing, whether it's music or comic books or books or movies or anything. And you start to have influences put on you from outside source. Well, it's kind of like closer sources that
Sure.
feeds to outside sources, right? How do you feel as an artist to be a creator and you start to have other outside things, potentially the
Okay.
NWO, the
Kevin
Illuminati,
Nash and
being like, hey, yeah. So imagine I say I'm Mr. NWO. I'm like, Dave, I like what you're doing with that horror house. But listen, I need you to change a couple things, and I'll give you a lot of money to do it. How do you what do you
clearly
think? What, like,
clearly
you
that
cool with that?
is an outsized influence. And if anything, that's more of a reason to push towards a system that is a stronger social safety net. I'm not going to worry. I'm not worried that I'm going to starve to death. I'm not worried that I'm not going to have health insurance to the point that I have to let myself
Mm-hmm.
be influenced by those moneyed interests. Now, that's not to
Don't
say
even
as long as
consider
there
that
is
part of
a
it.
capitalistic aspect that I'm not ever going to be influenced by money, but it gives me less reason to be influenced if I'm not worried about losing my house tomorrow
I
if I don't, sell out.
and when it comes to that, I've always really loved the way Paul Stanley of Kiss has described selling out, and he kind of essentially said that making a lot of money makes it nice because you don't have to worry about the money,
Mhm.
and you can create what you're creating, right? Obviously, you don't think of art and kind of Kiss in that regard. Like they're obviously trying to make as much money as possible.
But
But at the same time, like, your art is what you make and it's what you put out there. And if that makes a bunch of money, is that selling out? That just makes it to me like if Whorehouse started raking in billions and I'm like, oh god damn, my middle name's Jeffrey Bezos. That's not gonna for me change how we do Horror House because that just means I can worry more about Horror House and not have to worry about the money of Horror House, essentially. So the predictive programming idea of, you know, the powers that be being like, Dave, we have this bag of money with your name on it, but your next episode cannot be From Beyond, starring Jeffrey Combs and Barbara Crampton in some bondage gear. As saucy as that sounds, we need you to do something. Uh, we need you to do something very much. Um, we need you to do Dirty Dancing,
The Dirty
starring
Dancing remake starring Charles Band.
Patrick Swayze. Oh, the remake. Directed by Charles Band. Yes, the maybe the worst thing you could ever want. Uh, because that's part of what we were trying to set forth for this next whatever. How do you feel
I think
as a creator? If money's not if money is not a driving factor, it's all about the creation of what you do,
and
and
again,
then
you
that
said
happens.
if money is not a driving factor,
Thoughts,
and you know,
yeah, on a creative level,
if money is
what
not
are
a
your
factor,
thoughts?
I would much rather stick to my artistic vision. Now, it depends on where I'm at in my artistic vision. As you know, I've been working on the rough outline of a script, trying to do a little writing here, trying to really create something. And I don't know where I'm going with it. I don't have everything planned out, but I have a general overarching artistic vision. Where I'm at financially
Right.
tells me that, I can't afford to sink, thousands of dollars into something and not get some kind of return. Now
Interesting point.
if I was Paul Stanley and was living comfortably and wasn't worried about sinking, $10,000 to $15,000 into a project, then I don't think I would like to think that no amount of money could influence me if I had that artistic vision. Now, if I was a starving artist, like I don't know where my next paycheck is coming, my money's going to run out if I don't sell something. I'm much more likely to be influenced by
Hmm.
that. It's nice to think you would, but unless you're in those situations, you don't always know how you would actually react, how you cope.
Which is an interesting idea to me that I had not considered. So, like, if the starving artist uh, idea could be very easily manipulated by the powers that be, right? It's like, oh, you're gonna be able to pay the bills next month. What if I helped you pay the bills for an entire year? All you got to do, Dave, Dirty Dancing, next episode. That ain't that bad, is it? I think, Dave, we could start the new Illuminati, me and you, right now. I've got some ideas. Starving artist is
I'm
where
not
it's at.
wealthy enough to pay anybody's rent for the next week, let alone the whole next year. And what? I don't have any direction I need to influence anybody. You do your thing, man. Yeah, maybe I like it, maybe I won't.
I mean, that's an interesting idea, right? Like, get the people that aren't the creators of today, right? Get the people that are the creators of the next generation
So,
already in your pocket.
so you're like,
I'm
so you want me
take
to
care
like
of you,
get
but
a
you gotta.
fistful of ones, go down to Graham Creek Elementary when they're on playground recess, and be like, "Hey, kid, you like to draw pictures? Draw more pictures of kookaburras, and I'll give you $1 every week."
Dude, I'd drew you so many chupacabras, it'd have been possible. You'd have been like, enough. Fuck off. But the interesting idea. I hadn't considered, like, you know, these people that are breaking out now. Who Louis Capaldi, the British singer, a very, very pop singer. I think he's hilarious. I've seen him on TikTok a lot. I think he's a very funny guy. He reminds me of the guy from Pee-wee's Big Adventure. He's like, Pee-wee, I want to buy your bike. That guy, Francis. That may be kind of mean to him, but it's true. It is true. But he's a great singer, and he's fucking hilarious. But he's this kind of bigger guy. Is that a play by the government? You know, because certainly the idea of him, rather than him himself, like the idea of him, is easily gotten at with money and fame. Like I think his first tour was sold out before his album came out. That doesn't happen.
Yeah, that's okay. Great marketing. The influence of social media.
Yeah. There's that. Any other kind of topics? We've went on a fucking hell of a tangent, but
I have one in my pocket, Chris, and I'm going to save it because I feel like we might come around to this topic at another time.
You're going to save it?
Another season in another graveyard.
I think now, probably, given our history as Horror House boys, the most logical thing for us to do before we end this episode is rate our opinion of this conspiracy theory. Call it a conspiracy theory. I'm doing the sour face because I don't know if I should or if I should.
Theory. We'll just say theory. What is the plausibility rating on a scale of
perfect
0 to 10? And just like the movies, there is no real meaning to the rating. It's just a number.
It's personal to us, and maybe you can identify with both of us, one of us. Yeah, and of course we want to know also what you think. So let us know on our social medias. Check the descriptions, baby. They're right down there, and let us know. Dave, this was your episode. So you go first. Typically, whoever picks the episode goes second because I don't know. But you go first now. You go first now because it's been a long bitch. It's been
we do what we want. We do what we want around here.
So you go first,
sure.
And let us know your rating for plausibility and your overall just kind of opinion on predictive programming. The floor is yours.
I have my rating, and a couple years ago, my rating would have been higher than it is now. Because, like I said, I had gone down this rabbit hole, and I think it's very easy to get down a rabbit hole and get influenced by what you're seeing if you're not careful to keep in mind that the algorithm always feeds you what you seem to be enjoying and engaging with.
Right.
And so if you can, if you go down those rabbit holes, break it up, intentionally look for other opinions. This is part of critical thinking. Be able to explain your side without bias. Look at and be able to explain the opposite. If you can't do that, you are not looking objectively at things. You can't just go by feel. You actually have to have evidence. Your gut does not always tell you the truth. Sometimes life, uh, art is a reflection of life. It's a reflection of our culture. I believe we've talked about how different villains and how zombies at different times mean different things in pop culture because of what's prominent or what's in the common zeitgeist at the time. The same can go with art theme. What's common in the minds of people shows up in our pop culture. Right now, representation is big. If people are more drawn to shows with representation, if I know a movie is about 20 best friends who live in New York City and not one of them is a minority and they don't ever know any minorities, there's a implausibility to that because minorities exist. Representation matters, and so art is going to reflect that. But there's also just as much evidence to suggest that life imitates art. If the idea when you had Armageddon and Deep Impact and you started having black actors play the president, yes, it was not as much of a leap of faith to believe that a black person could be president. We shouldn't need a movie to tell us that a black person could be president, but it crossed a Rubicon in our mind of acceptance. And so I don't think it was instructing us to make a black person president. It just allowed it to happen for some people. Some people needed to see that on their TV set in the movies for that to exist in real life.
Mm-hmm.
Just as easily, if I'm an artist and I have an opinion, I'm going to put that opinion out there. And if I'm successful, a lot of people are going to see it, and maybe that changes people's minds, open people's minds. Maybe other people copy my success, and so what seems like a trend that is being forced is actually a trend of success, and copycatting someone who is successful. I'm split on the possibility because definitely in the 40s, 30s, 50s, the government actually subsidized movie making to get this pro America propaganda out there. Now, they didn't have to work very hard to do that because there was a patriotism. Remember, after Desert Shield, Desert Storm, after 9/11, suddenly everybody had a flag in their yard, and there was this, America coming together. And it was in movies. You can't go to a sporting event without seeing the color guard there or a flyover or some kind of military demonstration. The military, spoiler alert, does pay teams to do that. They pay the team to be able to spend $100,000 flying 3 jets over the stadium before the football game. The outcome of that is not nefarious. It's recognition of the military. It's seeing the military as something special, and it absolutely is. I spent time. I know the camaraderie. I know how precious this is, and these people are willing to do a job that the other 93% of Americans are not willing to do. About 7% of Americans spend some time in the service. The other 93% are not willing to. So we should celebrate the 7% that are willing to. That doesn't mean we have to suck their dick every day. That doesn't mean that just because they're a veteran, they have more of a say or a better take on things like gun violence or crime or religion or, what have you. But there is an honor there. So honoring them with these flyovers is not a bad thing. Propaganda is not always nefarious. It's good that we have a sense of community and togetherness, because otherwise you have, a billion people pulling in a billion different directions. And that doesn't work very well. So, yes, I believe there is something that happens sometimes, but do I believe that they are orchestrating big events and warning us beforehand or conditioning us to react a certain way beforehand? No. So, for the plausibility of predictive programming as a whole, if I'm 50-50, then I'm going to get you right down the line with a 5 out of 10.
Wow. I kind of expected you to be a little bit higher, honestly, over the course of our discussion tonight. I must say. So
It's not a movie, Chris. I don't artificially inflate my scores.
you heard it here first. Shortcut? You're dropping. You're dropping, brother.
Ah,
Who thought it possible? So for me, at the beginning, when you decided on this topic, I didn't really know what you were talking about, really. Vaguely, and then you described it, and I'm like, oh, right, that. And doing, looking into it, but it almost feels weirdly like a conspiracy theory, but in passing, right? Like, it's not one that's super like it's the lizard people, right? Like Mike Pence is a lizard man, which I'm not believing until somebody disproves it. But it wasn't something like I read about or watched about, really. I mean, here or there, it seems like a little bit of an idea. But that said, it's not a theory I put a lot of stock into, especially as we've talked tonight, getting into the art versus predictive programming or are influenced by predictive programming. I think, for one thing, anyone that I think the government that thinks the government has this power, and I shouldn't just limit it to the government because I feel like the Illuminati and like the powers that be would be higher than them, right? But I mean, if you look at the government, it's like cats in a sleeping bag, right? Like they don't accept each other. They don't get along. So when it comes to like,
or is
okay,
it
we
an
need to,
act?
yeah, we don't want to, we want to put forth this message. Even if it was 75% of this group of government people trying to push that forth, the other 25% would be obnoxiously against it. So there's that kind of to think about. But I mean, you get into the elite, right? And maybe perhaps that is a different kind of a beast. Maybe it's not paying your starving artist rent for a year. Maybe it's like, I can set you up for life. And is that out of the question for some of these people that you never even really know of that are so rich that you don't, this isn't Jeffrey Bezos. This is whoever that you've never even heard of. The name is so rich that I don't know I don't know what the agenda could be. But I at the end of the day, I'm just not on that level. But hey, I am an easy guy. I feel like I'm pretty easy to get along with. if if I have to, then I guess I'm pretty all right with the Suzanne Snyder programming that they've built for me. Count me in. And the
Okay.
fact that RoboCop and the Terminator are both going to be a real thing. I mean, if that is in fact the future that they've decided, I am super on board. So I don't know who's going to tell my wife about Suzanne Snyder. Certainly not myself. But listen,
No, because that would be the last time you exist as a living person.
yeah. But I mean, if she's going to come pick me up in a couple days, I don't know what the Illuminati has planned. I'm just going to wait for it. But until then, until that happens, until Suzanne picks me up and it's driven by Peter Weller RoboCop. Uh, until then, I can only give this a 1.5.
One, oh, that's lower than I thought you would be.
A lot of that I take from that artist conversation that we were having. Like, if somebody even outside of my band was to be like, Chris, that guitar riff, little mid, I'd be like, okay. If you change it, I'll give you, I don't care. I could not fucking care less. How much you want to give me to change this? I mean, if you're a fan, you're like, I don't like this song or this movie. I mean, I feel like that is a complete difference. And you would like, okay, I understand. Okay. I will take what your criticisms to heart and I will adjust what I'm doing. Because I believe that you like the rest of what I'm doing. But if it's just like some corporate fucking bullshit, I ain't fucking down, yo. I ain't fucking down. Eat a dick, Spotify.
Well, I mean, what if? And I hate. We're going to ramp back up here, as sometimes we do.
Sometimes you gotta.
What if it's not? I want you to change what you're doing, and I'll pay you. What if it's there are thousands of starving artists out there? What if instead I pick the one that's already doing what I like and just promote that one over others who maybe are more
Maybe.
artistically, better, but
Maybe.
because this one has the message I like, this is the one I promote.
Then what does I mean that really doesn't change anything for that starving artist. So it
Right, right.
doesn't alter what they do. Which ultimately is I care about that more. So there it goes.
All right.
When
Well,
it comes to the passion of the project, whatever that
of
project
the
may be,
Christ.
whether it's of the Christ or of the movie or of the music, you gotta heed that first before the money. And I'll always live that way. I'll die in the gutter that way. And
Well, I mean,
I very well may.
you have to have the eye of the tiger. It's the thrill of the fight.
Yeah, what you are, if you're an artist of any shape, I feel like that takes precedent over a lot of things, unfortunately. Because I get it. I understand. So, fucking Papa Trump ain't telling me ain't telling me no chord progressions. So, did I say Papa Trump? I'm going to delete that.
You just called Trump your daddy.
Oh, Daddy Trump, fuck off. Slip in the shower. God damn, I'm going to have to edit a lot of this episode. I won't edit a minute.
I won't have it. I won't have it. Don't alter your vision.
Yeah. That's I was at about a 2 before, but as the artist discussion really sparked something in my brain because yeah.
Here's your call to action. If you want, we would like you to tell us how plausible you think, or give us some specific examples of where you have identified predictive programming in popular culture and the effect that it's had. Maybe it had a reverse psychology effect. Maybe it had the intended effect. But you can
Right.
let us know through direct message or through tagging us in your tweets on Sweetness One with 6 E's or at Horror House 2 because there are two of us.
You can email us horrorhousepodcast@gmail.com or go to the Horror House page on Facebook.
You could, I believe, leave us a voicemail on anchor.fm/horror house.
And perhaps the most important thing is share us, review us, rate us. And, you know, man, if you believe and if you like what us Horror House boys are doing, the best thing you can do is help us spread the word and just get us out there, man. We're not going anywhere, so hey, even if you don't, if you're just like, man, I ain't into that, that ain't my bag, hey, we appreciate you if you do or you don't. But, listen, I'll be honest. If you do, it'd be a pretty cool because if you haven't picked up any Spotify vibes in the last couple episodes, let me tell you, there's some Spotify for podcasters vibes going on.
They're hot and heavy in here.
With that said, coming up next week, I don't think I'm even going to say anything, Dave. I think I pretty much gave a pretty big indicator. Like 20
yeah,
20 or 30
so.
minutes.
I think you teased.
Yeah. But what if we gave them not just a tease for next week, but a tease for the next IRL episode?
Okay.
What would you think? What do you think would be a great tease for that?
If I was teasing the next IRL episode, I would say that it very much can tie to predictive. I mean,
Okay.
it very much is an otherworldly discussion.
Okay.
But it is a discussion we've had before, but we're looking at it from a more modern case breakdown.
Okay.
And I think that's all. I mean, I think anything more than that, full on. And I
leave it at that.
I'm trying to cock tease a little bit here. I'm trying to tease. So I'll stop there. But got a popular one, a good one coming up next.
Just a couple weeks for the next IRL, but next week, Barbara Crampton is some bondage gear. We'll leave it at that. Which sounds
tiny thumb.
Super not bad. Super not bad. We will see you guys next week. We are out. Same cemetery, different grave.
We out. Bye. That's it. Go home.